"That car is dead," Claire Whitmore said, and the whole ballroom believed her. The words cut clean through the polished air of the Chicago Grand Hotel, where crystal chandeliers burned like small suns above a crowd of investors, reporters, collectors, and men in tailored suits who knew the price of everything and the value of almost nothing. On the stage beneath the lights sat the Whitmore Aurelia, a silver 1964 concept car with white-wall tires, a long hood, and a history heavy enough to make old mechanics lower their voices. It had once belonged to Claire's father, the man who built Whitmore Motors from a two-bay garage into an American empire. Now it sat silent, its chrome dulled by years of storage, its engine refusing to turn over after 3 public attempts, each failure louder than the last. A nervous host laughed into the microphone. A technician wiped sweat from his forehead. Somewhere in the crowd, someone whispered, "Embarrassing." Claire stood beside the car in a midnight blue dress and a CEO's smile that did not reach her eyes. "Ladies and gentlemen," she said, her voice smooth, controlled, final, "some machines carry history, but history does not make them alive. That car is dead." A few people clapped politely, relieved to follow her lead. Then a low voice came from the edge of the stage. "No, ma'am. It's not dead." Heads turned. A man in faded work boots stood near the rear tire, holding a folded canvas cover in one hand. His name was Ethan Walker, though almost nobody in that room knew it. To them, he was just the temporary mechanic hired to help roll the old car on and off the platform. His shirt was clean but worn at the collar. His hands were scarred, oil-lined, and steady. He looked like a man who had spent most of his life fixing what other people were too proud to understand. Claire slowly turned toward him. "Excuse me." Ethan glanced at the Aurelia, not at the cameras, not at the jewels, not at the people already smiling at his mistake. "It's waiting for the right hands." The ballroom broke into laughter, soft at first, then spreading in waves. Derek Shaw, Whitmore's head of engineering, leaned toward a reporter and smirked. "Every auction has one dreamer." Claire stepped closer, her heels clicking against the platform like a judge's gavel. "And are those hands supposed to be yours?" Ethan did not answer quickly. He looked down at the car's front grille, at the tiny crack near the emblem, at something no one else had noticed. The chandeliers hummed above him. The engine cooled in silence. And for one brief second, the dead car seemed to be listening. By the time the ballroom lights were being dimmed and the last bidders were gathering their coats, Ethan Walker had already stepped away from the stage. He did not stay to explain himself. He did not defend the sentence that had made rich people laugh into their champagne glasses. He simply picked up his dented toolbox, signed the temporary service sheet near the loading dock, and walked out into the cold Chicago night with the same quiet dignity he had carried in with him. His truck was parked 3 blocks away because valet parking cost more than his dinner. It was an old white Ford with a cracked dashboard, a heater that worked when it felt merciful, and a booster seat in the back that still had glitter stickers on one side. Ethan sat behind the wheel for a moment before starting it. He looked at his hands, the oil in the creases, the small burn near his thumb, the kind of hands people noticed only when something broke. Then his phone buzzed. "Daddy, are you coming home soon?" Lily asked, her voice small and sleepy. Ethan smiled, and the hardness in his face softened like frost under morning sun. "I am on my way, sweetheart." "Did the fancy car work?" He looked through the windshield at the glowing hotel entrance, where Claire Whitmore's guests were still stepping into black SUVs. "Not tonight. But you could fix it, right?" The question was so innocent it almost hurt. Ethan started the truck. Some things take time. 40 minutes later, he pulled into the narrow driveway of their rented duplex in Cicero, where the porch light flickered and the wind carried the smell of wet leaves across the street. Inside, Lily was asleep on the couch with a blanket around her shoulders and a sketchbook open against her knees. She had drawn the Aurelia from memory after seeing a picture online. Only in her version the headlights looked like eyes and the hood was surrounded by little yellow stars. Ethan stood there for a long breath, listening to the hum of the refrigerator, the faint tick of the wall clock, the ordinary music of a life held together by effort. On the kitchen table sat a medical bill from Lily's eye specialist, folded beside a jar of coins labeled surgery fund in purple marker. Ethan touched the jar once, then looked back at his daughter. Years ago, people had called him gifted. A restorer. A miracle hand. But grief has a way of making a man choose shadows over applause. And by morning, the world would still think he was only a single dad with a toolbox. Logan rose again when the second witness was called, and the legs of his chair made a soft scrape against the courtroom floor. The sound was small, but somehow everyone heard it. ADA Keegan turned toward the witness stand with his practiced confidence and called Mrs. Margaret Thompson, the owner of the black Chevy Silverado. She entered slowly, 72 years old, silver hair tucked beneath a navy church hat, one hand gripping her purse as if it carried every worry she had left in the world. Judge Isabella Reeves softened her voice. "Mrs. Thompson, take your time." The old woman nodded, but when she looked at Logan, her eyes did not hold anger. They held confusion. Keegan noticed that and moved quickly. "Mrs. Thompson, did you give Mr. Carter permission to enter your vehicle on March 3rd? "No, sir." "Did you know him personally?" "No, sir." "And when you found your truck damaged, how did you feel?" She swallowed. "Scared. I live alone. My husband passed 6 years ago. That truck was his." A quiet sympathy moved through the jury box. Keegan let it settle, then looked at Logan as if the case had already been wrapped in a ribbon. No further questions. Judge Reeves turned. "Mr. Carter." Logan stepped forward, not like a man eager to win, but like a man careful not to break something fragile. "Mrs. Thompson," he said gently, "I am sorry about your husband." Her lips trembled. "Thank you. And I am sorry your truck was damaged." Keegan shifted. Ready to object, but Logan kept his voice calm. "Do you remember calling for roadside assistance that evening?" The old woman blinked. "I called my insurance number. The truck would not start." "Do you remember what the dispatcher told you?" She frowned, searching through the fog of a stressful night. "That someone would come look at it, but it might take over an hour." Logan nodded. "And do you remember leaving your spare key above the left rear tire, where your husband always kept it?" A hush moved across the room. Mrs. Thompson stared at him. "How did you know that?" Logan did not smile. "Because you told me when I answered the roadside request through a veterans volunteer program. You said your late husband believed no good man should be locked out when he was trying to help." The courtroom went still. Even Keegan stopped moving. Logan turned slightly toward the evidence table. "I was not stealing her truck. I was trying to restart it before the rain got worse. The dashboard was already open because the starter relay had shorted." Judge Reeves leaned forward. "Do you have proof of that volunteer request, Mr. Carter?" Logan reached into his worn folder and lifted one folded sheet. "Yes, Your Honor. Time-stamped dispatch log, insurance reference number, and my volunteer identification." For the first time that morning, the prosecutor's face lost its shine. Mrs. Thompson covered her mouth with one trembling hand. And Judge Reeves, who had begun the day seeing only a poor single dad without counsel, now looked at Logan Carter as if the room had been too loud to hear the truth until this very moment. ADA Mark Keegan recovered first, because men like him often mistake recovery for truth. He cleared his throat, adjusted the cuffs of his navy suit, and gave the jury a smile that looked polished enough to hide panic. "Your Honor, one volunteer log does not erase the fact that Mr. Carter ran from an officer." Logan remained still at his table, hands folded, eyes lowered. Judge Isabella Reeves looked from the paper to Keegan, then back to Logan. "Mr. Carter, is there a reason you did not mention this earlier?" Logan lifted his gaze. "I tried to, Your Honor." Keegan scoffed. "Convenient." Logan did not answer him, He turned slightly toward the bench. I told Officer Daniels I was there on a service call. I told him my identification was in my left jacket pocket. I told him Mrs. Thompson had asked for help. The courtroom seemed to lean closer. 3 sentences. Quiet. Simple. Heavy. Judge Reeves turned toward Officer Daniels, who still sat near the front row with his jaw tight and his hands clasped too hard. Officer Daniels, did the defendant make those statements? The officer looked down once. He said something about helping. Something? The judge asked. Her voice was not sharp, but it carried the weight of a door closing. Did he mention a volunteer identification? Daniels shifted in his seat. I do not recall clearly. Logan opened his folder again, slowly, respectfully, like a man unwrapping grief instead of evidence. May I submit one more item, Your Honor? Keegan stepped forward. Objection. We have not authenticated whatever surprise Mr. Carter is producing now. Logan looked at him with quiet dignity. It is not a surprise to the state. It was in the property bag. A murmur passed through the gallery. Judge Reeves narrowed her eyes. What item? My volunteer identification card, Your Honor. The one taken from my jacket at booking. The clerk checked the inventory sheet. Her fingers moved down the list, then stopped. The sound of paper turning became louder than any accusation in the room. Identification card, Roadside Veterans Assistance Program, she read softly. Logged at 11:43 p.m. The prosecutor's smile disappeared completely. Judge Reeves stared at the sheet as if it had changed shape in her hands. Then she looked at Keegan. Was this disclosed? Keegan swallowed. Your Honor, I would need to review the file. You are standing in your own file, Mr. Keegan. The words landed gently, but they shook the room. Mrs. Thompson began to cry without making a sound. Logan did not look pleased. He looked tired, almost sorrowful, because a decent man never celebrates another person's humiliation. He only waits for the truth to stand up on its own. Outside the tall courthouse windows, late morning. Light spread across the marble floor in pale gold lines, touching Logan's worn shoes, the evidence table, and the judge's bench with the same patient grace. For the first time, the room did not see a desperate man defending himself. They saw a father who had carried the truth in silence while everyone else called it guilt. Judge Isabella Reeves called a brief recess, but no one in courtroom 7B truly moved. The jurors stood because they were told to stand. The clerk gathered papers because duty required hands to keep working. ADA Mark Keegan turned toward his team and whispered fast, his voice low and clipped, but the confidence that had filled him earlier now leaked out between every word. Logan Carter stayed at the defendant's table. He did not check his phone. He did not pace. He only looked down at the worn folder in front of him, the same folder everyone had dismissed as the sad little shield of a man who could not afford counsel. From the back row, a small voice broke through the heavy air. Daddy? Logan turned, and the whole room followed his eyes. A little girl stood beside the door with a school backpack hanging from one shoulder, her brown hair slightly messy, her face pale with worry. Beside her was Mrs. Alvarez, Logan's neighbor from Edgewater Apartments, still wearing her grocery store name tag. I am sorry, Mrs. Alvarez said quickly to the bailiff. Her school called. I did not know where else to bring her. Logan's expression changed for the first time all morning. Not fear. Not shame. Love. Maddie, he said softly, standing. You are supposed to be in class. The girl stepped forward, stopping only when the bailiff lifted a gentle hand. They said you might not come home. The words did not accuse anyone, but they landed harder than accusation. Logan swallowed, then knelt a few feet away so his eyes were level with hers. I told you the truth always needs time, remember? Maddie nodded, fighting tears. But sometimes people do not listen. A hush settled over the gallery. Judge Reeves, standing near the side door to chambers, had not left after all. She watched the child, then the father, and something in her face softened past. Professionalism. Logan gave his daughter a small smile. Then we stay respectful until they can. Maddie reached into her backpack and pulled out a folded drawing on-line notebook paper. I made this for good luck. The bailiff looked to the judge. Reeves gave a small nod. The drawing passed hand to hand until it reached Logan. It showed a stick figure father holding a toolbox beside an old truck, with a child beside him and 3 crooked words written above them, "My dad helps." Logan closed his eyes for one breath. The courtroom smelled of floor wax, old paper, and the faint rain carried in from wet coats near the door. Fluorescent lights hummed above them like the world trying to speak but not knowing how. Keegan looked away first. Officer Daniels looked down next. And Judge Reeves looked at Logan Carter not as a case number, not as a defendant, not as a poor single father standing alone, but as a man whose quiet dignity had been witnessed by the one person who mattered most. When the recess ended, Maddie was allowed to sit beside Mrs. Alvarez in the back row, small hands wrapped around the drawing she had not expected to become evidence of anything except love. Logan returned to the defendant's table, and the room returned with him, quieter now, more careful. Judge Isabella Reeves adjusted her glasses and looked toward ADA Mark Keegan. The state may proceed, but I suggest we move with precision. Keegan stood, smoothing his tie though it was already straight. Your Honor, the state calls Deputy Clerk Nolan Pierce to authenticate the security footage. A thin man in a gray jacket stepped forward with a flash drive sealed in plastic. He took the oath, sat stiffly, and avoided looking at Logan. Keegan approached the screen. Mr. Pierce, is this the surveillance video from the corner camera near Edgewater Apartments? Yes. Was it provided to law enforcement the night of March 3rd? Yes. Does it show Mr. Carter near the vehicle? Yes. Keegan clicked play, and grainy footage filled the screen. A dark street. A black truck. Rain falling in silver lines. A figure near the driver's side. The gallery leaned in. Maddie held her breath. Keegan paused the video on Logan's shape and turned to the jury. There he is. For 1 second, the old accusation tried to rise again. Then Logan stood. May I ask the witness a few questions, Your Honor? Reeves nodded. Proceed. Logan walked toward the screen with the same steady calm, stopping several feet away. Mr. Pierce, is this the full video? Pierce blinked. It is the clip requested. That was not my question. The clerk swallowed. No. It is not the full video. Keegan stiffened. Logan did not look at him. How long is the full recording? About 42 minutes. How long is the clip shown here? 1 minute and 12 seconds. A murmur moved through the room like wind under a closed door. Logan kept his voice even. Who requested only that portion? Pierce looked toward Keegan's table, then down at his hands. The district attorney's office. Keegan rose. Objection to implication. Judge Reeves looked at him over her glasses. Overruled. The implication appears to be coming from the math. Logan turned back to Pierce. Please play from 7 minutes before the clip begins. The screen flickered. Rain. Empty sidewalk. Mrs. Thompson's truck sitting still. Then headlights swept into view. Logan's old sedan pulled up. He stepped out wearing the same faded green jacket, holding a flashlight in one hand and a phone in the other. He looked at the truck, checked the rear tire, found a spare key, and before touching the door, he held his phone up as if reading instructions. Then he glanced toward the sky, toward the rain, and toward the apartment building where an elderly woman waited for help. No rush. No hiding. No guilt. Just a man answering a call in bad weather. Judge Reeves sat motionless. Officer Daniels stared at the floor. Mrs. Thompson pressed both hands to her mouth. And in the back row, Maddie whispered to Mrs. Alvarez, "See? My dad helps." This time, no one in courtroom 7B laughed. Keegan asked for permission to approach the bench, but his voice had lost the clean edge it carried that morning. Judge Isabella Reeves allowed it, and the two attorneys' tables seemed to hold their breath while the white noise machine near the bench hummed softly. Logan stayed where he was. He did not try to listen. He did not need to. Truth had a different rhythm than strategy, and by now, everyone in courtroom 7B could feel the difference. After a moment, Reeves leaned back and spoke clearly. The jury will disregard the state's prior characterization of the video as complete context. Keegan's jaw tightened. Your Honor, the state still maintains that Mr. Carter fled from Officer Daniels. Logan stood before Keegan could turn that word into another rope. May I recall Officer Daniels, Your Honor? Reeves studied him, then nodded. You may. Officer Daniels returned to the witness stand more slowly than before. The badge on his chest caught the fluorescent light, but the shine no longer felt like certainty. Logan walked forward with his folder held at his side. Officer Daniels, when you arrived, were your emergency lights on? Yes. Was it raining? Yes. Was traffic passing behind you on Cedar Avenue? Some. Logan paused. When you shouted at me, what exact words did you use? Daniels looked uncomfortable. I told you to stop. Did you identify yourself before shouting? I was in uniform. That was not my question. The room went still again. Daniels exhaled. No, not before the first command. Logan nodded once. And when I moved away from the truck, did I run toward the alley or toward the streetlight? Daniels frowned. Toward the streetlight. Toward the brighter area? Yes. Toward the place where both of us could be seen. A pause. Yes. Logan let the answer settle. Then he reached for the final page in his folder. Did I raise my hands when I reached the sidewalk? Daniels closed his eyes for half a second. Yes. The word was small, but it changed the air. Keegan stared at the table. Mrs. Thompson wept quietly into a tissue. Maddie sat perfectly still, learning too young that adults could be wrong loudly and corrected softly. Logan lowered the paper. Officer, did you ever ask why I was there before deciding what I was? Daniels looked at him, and for the first time, he looked less like an accuser and more like a man seeing the person beneath the report. No, he said. I did not. The silence that followed was not empty. It was full of every rushed judgment, every cheap laugh, every moment when a tired single father had been reduced to the worst story someone else could tell about him. Judge Reeves wrote nothing. She only watched Logan Carter stand beneath the buzzing lights with the kind of quiet grace that does not demand respect, but makes disrespect feel ashamed of itself. Judge Reeves allowed Officer Daniels to step down, but he did not return to his seat with the same stiff certainty. He walked like a man carrying more than a badge, more than a report, more than the pride that had kept him from hearing a father explain himself in the rain. ADA Keegan stood next, and for a moment he seemed to search the courtroom for the old version of the room, the one that had laughed with him, nodded with him, trusted his polished voice without question. But that room was gone. The jurors were not leaning back anymore. They were leaning forward. Mrs. Thompson was looking at Logan like she had found the neighbor she wished she had known sooner. Maddie was holding her drawing against her chest like a small flag of truth. Keegan cleared his throat. Your Honor, the state requests a short continuance to review newly emphasized materials. Judge Reeves slowly folded her hands. Newly emphasized. Her voice stayed calm, which somehow made it heavier. Mr. Keegan, the volunteer identification was in state custody. The full video was in state custody. The dispatch log was referenced in the defendant's initial statement. None of this is new. Keegan's face flushed. The state acted in good faith based on available interpretation. Logan looked down. He had heard that kind of language before, words dressed up to avoid saying sorry. Reeves looked toward the jury, then toward Logan. "Mr. Carter, before I rule on anything further, I want to understand one matter." Logan stood. "Yes, Your Honor." "Why did you waive counsel?" The question was gentle, but it opened a door no evidence had touched. Logan took a breath. "Because the public defender assigned to me had 19 cases that morning, and I could see he had not slept. Because my daughter needed rent paid more than I needed a private attorney. Because I spent enough years reading regulations, reports, and testimony to know that facts still matter when someone is willing to read them." The room went quiet again, but this silence had warmth inside it. Reeves studied him. "You said you spent years reading testimony. In what capacity?" Logan hesitated, and for the first time, something like reluctance crossed his face. "Not fear of shame. Fear of being seen too clearly. Military legal support, Your Honor. Before I came home." Keegan looked up sharply. Reeves did too. Logan continued, voice low. "I was not an attorney of record. I assisted Judge Advocate General officers with case preparation, witness review, procedural compliance, and evidence analysis during my final years of service." A soft gasp passed through the back row. Suddenly the worn folder made sense. The careful questions made sense. The calm under pressure made sense. Judge Reeves leaned back, her expression no longer doubtful, but humbled. Logan had never been pretending to understand the courtroom. He had been waiting patiently for the courtroom to understand him. The words military legal support settled over courtroom 7B like a bell struck once and left to echo. ADA Mark Keegan stared at Logan Carter as if the man in the faded jacket had changed shape in front of him, but Logan had not changed at all. He was still the same father, the same volunteer, the same quiet man who had stood alone while the room decided he was small. Only now, the room had to admit it had been looking with lazy eyes. Judge Isabella Reeves leaned forward. "Mr. Carter, why was that experience not listed in your initial statement?" Logan gave a small, tired smile. "Because no one asked who I had been. They only asked what I had done." The sentence landed softly, but it reached every corner. Keegan stepped forward, trying to regain balance. "Your Honor, military administrative experience does not make the defendant an expert in California criminal procedure." Logan turned to him, calm as still water. "No, it does not." Keegan blinked, surprised by the agreement. Logan continued, "But it taught me to preserve records, read timelines. Compare statements, and notice when a 1-minute video is pretending to be a 42-minute truth." A juror lowered her eyes, not from boredom, but from shame. Judge Reeves looked at the prosecutor. "Mr. Keegan, do you wish to continue with your evidence?" He opened his mouth, then closed it. His team shuffled papers that had suddenly become too thin to hide behind. "The state would like to call Detective Marla Henson regarding the dash camera." Logan's eyes flicked once toward the cracked device in the evidence bag. Not fear. Recognition. Detective Henson took the stand, professional and measured, her hair pulled back, her dark blazer damp at the shoulders from the rain outside. Keegan moved quickly. "Detective, did you examine the dashboard camera recovered from Mrs. Thompson's vehicle?" "Yes." "Was the lens damaged?" "Yes." "Was the memory wiped?" The accessible memory was empty. Keegan nodded with relief. "And in your experience, what can that indicate?" "That footage was deleted, corrupted, or never recorded properly." Logan rose. "Detective Henson, did you say never recorded properly?" "Yes." "Did you open the camera housing?" "No." The lab had not completed that step. "So you cannot testify that anyone wiped it manually?" "No." Logan walked to the evidence table and stopped a respectful distance away. May the court note the model number printed on the device? Reeves nodded. The clerk read it aloud. Logan turned back. Detective, are you aware that this model stores backup footage on a removable micro card beneath the inner plate, separate from the accessible memory? Henson paused. Keegan froze. The clerk turned the device gently inside the clear bag. Beneath the cracked casing, barely visible under a strip of black plastic, was a tiny slot no one had bothered to check. Logan lowered his voice. Sometimes the truth is not missing. Sometimes it is just ignored because it is inconvenient. Judge Reeves looked at the evidence bag, then at the prosecutor, and the silence that followed was no longer doubt. It was the sound of a courtroom realizing the poor single father had just found the one witness that could not be pressured, embarrassed, or misunderstood.